Today I'm directing the United States Trade Representative to examine China's policies, practices, and actions with regard to the forced transfers of American technology and the theft of American intellectual property. And we will protect forgotten Americans who have been left behind by a global trade system that has failed to look, and I mean look, out for their interests.
Notably tough words on China from President Trump. The president ordering his top trade official to investigate unfair Chinese trade practices, including U.S. corporate charges that Chinese companies and the Chinese government steals U.S. trade secrets as well as intellectual property, U.S. R&D. This, as a Chinese state-run newspaper has said that any U.S. investigation on this issue will, quote, poison relations between the two countries. The move, which could lead to steep tariffs on Chinese goods by the U.S., it comes at a time when the president has asked China to do much more to crack down on North Korea's rogue nuclear missile program. Joining me now, he is former Bush 43 foreign policy advisor and State Department official. He's Paul Bonicelli. Good to see you, Paul.
Hi, Liz.
Paul is with the Acton Institute as well. Now, Paul, is President Trump doing this to put pressure on China to do more with regard to North Korea?
I don't think he'll say that, but it's obvious that those things are linked, and I know it bothers the Chinese greatly to say that you shouldn't do any linkage between activities, but after all, they do it all the time. They go to small, weak countries and tell them, if you want a bunch of investment and credits from us, you will vote our way in the UN, you will be against Taiwan or something like that. So they're a bit hypocritical in their complaints about this, because they do know it's part of the President and the Secretary of State's overall plan to pressure China to be the one who can keep us from having to go to war with North Korea, I think.
Paul, how bad is China's theft of U.S. trade secrets and intellectual property?
It's so bad that it totally predates the North Korea crisis that the president is dealing with. You know, there are a lot of people complaining right now who are concerned about what's going to happen to businesses, but they should remember the president campaigned on this. If you're a free trader like I am, you'd love free trade agreements to be on about half a piece of paper. Just people are allowed to trade freely because we're free human beings. But in the political world, it doesn't work that way. Nations and companies are always struggling to get the best advantage. And what the president is going to do is require his trade representative to first study it, find out all the things that we know, the billions upon billions of dollars, as Colonel Peters said earlier, that the Chinese steal from our companies and the pressures they put on our companies that are working in China. They're not really free to work in China the way Chinese companies are free to work here. He wants that investigated, laid out, and then the WTO has trade dispute mechanisms. There are rules. We shouldn't write rules about free trade and then not follow them, and I think you'll see the president's administration go down this path where they insist on we're following the rules.
This comes right after China suggested a freeze-on-freeze, meaning that the U.S. freeze and not do the joint military exercises with South Korea. In exchange, North Korea will freeze its nuclear program. That has never worked. Will this work? Will this get China to step up and do more to crack down on North Korea and maybe do things like cut off oil exports into North Korea? That's the suggestion. Go ahead.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, first of all, we know that the Chinese government is corrupt. There's a lot of corruption in China, so the fact that they have done these sanctions, I know people are celebrating that, and I think it's a victory for the Trump administration, but actually enforcing those sanctions is different from actually, you know, for pronouncing them. So we'll see if they follow through. By keeping the pressure on, as the Trump administration is doing with our trade representative, the Chinese may actually follow through on these sanctions. But they do need to do more. You make a good point. It's not enough to cripple North Korea. China has to decide if the worst outcome is North Korea starting a war with us or us having to deal with retaliate and having Japan and South Korea both be nuclear powers. China has to make the decision here.